So now onto today's session, which is all around effective marine protected area management, policy protection, and public good. So we're going to have four presentations: Tim O'Higgins, George Hoppett, Oisin Callery, and Bob Rooms, and you'll see why they're all structured in a particular way. It all makes sense, and one sort of feeds into the other. And when the presentations are complete, we'll do a panel discussion then with Dr. Julie McGuire. So Tim, I'd like to invite you up. So Tim O'Higgins is from the Marine Affairs Division at the Department of Climate, Energy and Environment, and you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. And what we do is press that button. Okay.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Eve. My name is Tim O'Higgins. I am a marine biologist by training, and I'm a policy advisor with the Environment and Planning section of the Department of Climate, Energy and the Environment. Our section deals with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, and we're also responsible for the designation of marine protected areas in Ireland. And it's great to be here in the Kingdom. My father was right, it never rains in Kerry. So I just want to talk today about MPAs and what the Irish national process of MPAs is like. And Oliver O'Kyla had hoped to be here today, but unfortunately can't make it. So I'm giving the talk on his behalf. So three things: marine protected areas. Why are we trying to designate marine protected areas? What are we going to protect, and how are we going to protect it? So they're the three questions I want to ask and kind of answer in this talk today. So why are we designating marine protected areas? What are we protecting, and how are we protecting it? Why? So there are a lot of policy drivers for designating marine protected areas. I mean, we all hear a lot about climate change and biodiversity crisis, but in terms of actual...
Move that forward.
Sorry.
There you go.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? In terms of actual national policies, the government is committed under the Programme for Government to achieving 30% protection of Ireland's maritime area by 2030. And I saw a figure there of 880,000 square kilometres as Ireland's maritime area. That's incorrect. Ireland's maritime area is closer to about 500,000 square kilometres. That real map of Ireland is a little outdated. The other major policy drivers is under the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. We have an obligation to put in place spatial measures for protection under European law. The EU Green Deal commits to 30 by 30. And I suppose overall, sort of on the global stage for Ireland nationally, we're committed under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity to achieving this 30 by 30 goal. And in terms of national process and national preferences, there's a picture here of the Expanding Ireland's Marine Protected Area Network report, which came out in 2020. So this was a group of experts from across the university sectors and policy experts and legal experts that came up with a kind of a reasoned case for what Ireland's future marine protected areas might look like. Following publication of that report, we put the report out to public consultation, and we got over, I think it was like 3,000 responses to the public consultation, and about 80% of them were in support of marine protected areas. So there's a strong public support as well for marine protected areas nationally. So why are we designating these marine protected areas? And I think it's very important to recognise that, you know, as an island nation, the seas are important to us, but they're important to us for different things. And as a society, we have different sets of values. And very often you can hear the conversation about marine protected areas getting polarised. You hear about, you know, biodiversity versus fishing. And in these conversations about shared public space, we have to recognize the different sets of values. And up on the picture here, I've shown three sets of values. I've called one set I've called pure. These are the kind of pure nature values that we often hear from non-governmental organizations. And I put underneath that puffins. So this is just protection of species. And then we have practical uses for the marine environment. So, you know, we might want to extract natural resources. We might want to develop the seas for marine renewable energy, for example. And then we have a whole different popular set of values. The marine space belongs to the Irish citizens, all of us. And people use the seas for different things. People want to swim in the seas. People want to admire the views. So when we're considering designating marine protected areas, we need to include these three different sets of values, and we need to incorporate them into our decision-making process. So these are the environmental, economic, and social benefits of the ocean. Again, why are we designating marine protected areas? This is just a map of what it shows is vessel density. So just the amount of traffic around Ireland. I think the data here are from EMODNet 2020. But what you can see is there's a lot of different things going on with a lot of different spatial patterns. So in the reds and oranges, you can see the footprint of fishing. In the dark blue, you can see the major ferry ports and their tracks. In the lighter blue, you can see coastal maritime transport. And in yellow, right hugging along the coast, is a signature from recreation and tourism. So we have different things happening, and we have a vast maritime area that the black line shows the entire approximately 500,000 square kilometres of Ireland's settled marine environment. And then why, again, are we designating things? If you look, so what I've done here is I've split the Irish maritime area into a coastal zone, a 6 to 12 nautical mile zone, a shelf zone, and a deep zone. And I've tried to quantify the amount of activity in person days, in use days. And what you can see is inshore, you have fishing, vessels under 12, you have small fishing vessels, you have water-based activities, so that's people recreating. You see, and you can use a log scale on the left-hand side. So you're getting about 10 million use days a year in the coastal zone between fishers and swimmers and recreation. Now, as you go further offshore, you have less, and this is a log scale. So then you have the shelf, where the main activities are really fishing and maritime transport, and then you have the deep sea, where there's very little happening at all. So if we're going to designate marine protected areas, if we do it in the coastal zone, we're going to impact a lot of people, either positively or negatively. And the further offshore you go, the less interactions you're going to have with different industries and with different sectors. So why designate marine protected areas? Ultimately, the policy driver is 30 by 30. At present, we have approximately 10% of the area which is designated as a marine protected area, and this is all done under the Birds and Habitats directives. So we have these existing designations, and we're at 10%. We need to designate another 20% of the area. That's about 100,000 square kilometres between now and 2030. So it's a big ask. What are we going to protect? So what are we protecting? Well, at the moment we're preparing legislation. It's foreseen that the legislation will cover species. So threatened and endangered species, such as things on the OSPAR and IUCN red lists. These might be, charismatic Gelasmobranchs or angel sharks. They might be, the traditional list of things that marine biologists want to protect in marine protected areas. So, you know, Ireland has a very impressive marine biodiversity. We've got blue whales out there, the largest animal that ever lived. We have Greenland sharks out there, the longest lived animal in existence today. You have weird and wonderful varieties of species. I've drawn a picture of a short-snouted seahorse there. But we also want to protect habitats, so seagrass meadows, cold water corals, kelp forests, nursery and spawning habitats. But inside in the legislation, we're also hoping to provide for the protection of ecosystem services. So it's not, so ecosystem services are the benefits that people obtain from nature. So these could be things like provisioning services, fishing, extraction of living resources, regulating services. So these could be things like carbon burial or the capacity of the marine environment to protect coastal environments. And then you have cultural services, which are the intangible benefits that people receive from nature. And how are we going to protect it? So first of all, we need marine protected area legislation. And the government is currently preparing the general scheme of a bill to amend the Maritime Area Planning Act to provide for marine protected areas. So what does that mean? It means we're going to change the existing laws on planning to provide for the designation of and management of marine protected areas. And the bill will use this designated area maritime concept, or DMAP concept. And the idea is that we have a public call for features. So we ask the public what they want to protect. And then we identify potentially suitable areas for protection. Then we get the public to co-design, co-produce, co-develop the MPAs. So the public will be asked to feed into the design of management plans, of regulations, of the size and the shape of the marine protected areas. And then there'll be public consultation, and then following designation, the plan is also for effective management of marine protected areas. So in the past, if you wanted to fault our performance in terms of marine conservation, you could say we've designated areas, but we've done very little by way of managing them. So with each marine protected area, there will be a designated management authority, and the management authority will have the obligation to develop a management plan, to implement that management plan, and to report on the success of the management plan. And the legislation is planned to provide for enforcement and regulation powers in marine protected areas as well. So how are we going to deliver on these objectives? Like, even if we get the law, how do we actually put in place the process to deliver the MPAs? Well, there's a lot of talk about European projects. That's how we intend to fund the initial steps of the Marine Protected Area process. So the MPA Life Ireland project is a €25 million project. It started on the 1st of July 2024. It runs until 2033. There are 4 partners. So the Department of Climate, Energy and the Environment is the lead partner. We have inputs from UCD in terms of building, and UCG in terms of building the ecological evidence base. We have UCC, who are going to be assisting us with the stakeholder and participation and workshopping pieces. And then we have NUI Galway, or University of Galway, who Professor Stephen Hines, the Social and Economic Marine Research Unit, will assist us with the economic valuation part of the work. And just because we haven't had that many project meetings, just to familiarize you with a few of the people, and actually some of them are in the room. So on your left, I'll start with work package 1. The overall project lead of the project is Dr. Oliver O'Kyla. The ecological evidence base is being led jointly at the moment by Professor Taz Crowe and Professor Louise Alcock, circle there, work package 2. Professor Stephen Hines there on the right is circled on the right hand side, and then we have Dave White from UCC, who's on the left hand side, who's also in the room with us here today. I'm there in the middle. I don't know who the other people are. I think they're project officers from the commission or something like that. So a few of the major kind of highlights of the project is there's funding there for 198 person years of funding. So that's a hell of a lot of manpower. There's 3 million in there for ship time and monitoring and measuring. There's 2 million in there for the public outreach and making a series of documentaries on marine protected areas in Ireland. There's money for 180 stakeholder workshops, which is planned to run all over the country to assist with the designation, to do that co-design, co-development piece. And there's 4 project partners, and there's 3 major public outreach events, and these are kind of 50 grand events. They're like a big wedding. So you get a lot of bang for your buck for that. So how are we doing it? At the moment, we're focusing on the ecological evidence base, and we have run 2 sensitivity analysis. The first one was of the Irish Sea in 2023. The second one was of the Celtic Sea in 2024. And at the moment, we're looking at the rest of Ireland's marine environment to identify potentially suitable areas for marine protected areas. Now, it's quite a technical process. I won't go into the details, but those maps on the left, in terms of the darker shades of green, illustrate the areas that are potentially most suitable for marine protected areas. And finally, what's the timeline? So we're doing, so there's no, as you can see, this is supposed to be a timeline. There's supposed to be years in the little clouds at the top of the diagram. I haven't put them in because we're waiting from kind of approval from the government to make sure that these timelines align up with their thinking. But on the left-hand side, in 2026, the Atlantic sensitivity analysis has started. There's going to be a stakeholder call for features to protect. Plan to finalize the Atlantic sensitivity analysis around the end of this year, beginning of next year. They want to integrate the results of all 3 sensitivity analysis to vet and then identify the potentially suitable areas, draft proposals for MPAs. Then we're going to have to do the socio-economic and stakeholder participation piece. And then we probably finalize the first MPA proposals sometime before 2030, maybe 28, 29, something like that. And then designate MPAs by 2030. So look, we know what we want to do. We have the money to do it, and we have the plan. So we're at the beginning, but it's a big ask to achieve that by 2030. And I'm sure we'll discuss it more in the session later on. And for more on the process and to download any of the documents, you can visit the government website and search for marine protected areas. There's a full detailed kind of account of the process to date. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for giving us an overview of the project. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions during the panel discussion. So next up, we have George Hoppett from University College Dublin. He's going to talk to us about science-based tools for effective MPA management. And a lot of this is under the Blue for All project, which is also wise. So you're very welcome, George.
Yes. Well, thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm George Hoppett. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at University College Dublin. I work under Taz Crowe. I'm also working with Tim on the previous project where we're doing the iris sensitivity analysis at the moment. But in the other half of my work, I work on the EU Horizon project called Blue for All. What Blue for All is a project to try and understand and address the challenges associated with marine protected area processes. So the designation of sites, the management of sites, the monitoring and the reviewing of sites. And to do this, we look at the sort of tools one might use to help manage, monitor, and designate sites. So when I mean a tool, it's quite a high-level abstract term. Basically, it's a thing that helps you achieve a goal. So if you think of a hammer as a tool, the goal of the hammer is to hit a nail in. In terms of marine protected areas, you might want a tool for identifying where sites are located. You might want a tool for identifying economic considerations around MPAs, or you might want tools around the social governance aspect of MPAs. And so we wanted to scope out basically what tools exist for helping marine protected area processes, where the gaps are, and how might we build on existing tools to make them better for end users. This is part of a wider EU mission to help restore oceans and waters. So as most of the other Horizon projects, it's a very large project with a wide range of partners across the three major European sea basins, the Baltic, the North Atlantic, and the Mediterranean. And we're a combination of academics, NGOs, local and regional government, and MPA managers. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because Bob, I suspect, is going to go into much greater detail in his presentation. But essentially, what we're trying to do, as I said, is identify what tools would exist out there, how to categorize them, and how to feed them together into sort of collective hub where people can go as a resource to save you having to shop around, essentially. And the work I'm most involved with is work package 2 and 3, where we're identifying which tools already exist and how to develop or improve on tools which are already around. And then also working a little bit with work package 4, which is to work with stakeholder engagement groups to help better refine tools with end users. Blue for All data collection is coming to the end of, well, the data collection has finished. We're coming to the end of the project's lifespan. The project finishes in around December. And so we're working really on just finalizing the last couple of deliverables and our academic outputs. And essentially, it can be summed up with this picture. You'll have researchers who might develop a tool. And from the researcher perspective, it's fantastic. It does all these wonderful things, such as distracting a baby. But when you have the end user, in this case, a baby, or not saying MPA management are babies, but that's the sort of, I realize that metaphor actually doesn't play out very well. But from their perspective, the tool does not work as the researchers intended. So we want to try and bridge that gap. And so we achieved this with a combination of living labs and information sites. So living labs you're familiar with, which are basically groups of stakeholders feeding back into processes to help us understand what's going on, and information sites help us collect baseline data. For the purpose of this, I'm going to be talking about the Irish MPA expansion, which was one of our living labs. And I'm also going to be talking about Dundalk Bay, which is up on the northeast coast, just below the border with Northern Ireland. And this is a joint SPA and SAC. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 tools which we tested within the Irish context. So the first one is relevant to the Irish MPA expansion project. So when you're wanting to expand an MPA network, you want a tool which can help you identify the suitable sites. So in this case, the tool which was chosen was a tool called PlanWise, which was originally developed for use in the Baltic, but has general applicability anywhere you can get sufficient environmental data. This is a decision support tool, which for those unfamiliar, basically works by layering different pressure data on top of where you want features to be, and then working out through an algorithm what you might want to protect. So in this example, you'll have 2 pressures. You'll have offshore renewable energy in the form of wind farms, and you will have aquaculture. You work out where those areas overlap, and then you put them on top of a nature value, in this case, a form of seagrass. You then incorporate evidence about how these different human pressures affect the nature assets. So in the case of a wind farm, that will be very destructive on habitats because you're literally plonking a physical structure on top of where the habitat will be. So that kills the habitat. It might grow back later, but maybe not. And the second one would be the aquaculture, which maybe won't have as much of a direct destructive impact, but might have secondary impacts with things like eutrophication. And what this basically does is the underlying algorithm calculates a predicted change in the nature value to determine where areas are very sensitive to change. As Tim has already alluded to, Ireland's already done quite a bit of work in identifying where we want to be putting marine protected areas. This report was led by my boss, Tas Crowe, and it was then complemented with two different sensitivity analyses, which Tim has also alluded to, where we basically identified what we want to protect, how we want to protect it, and how sensitive those features are, and how, therefore, in need of protection they are. So going through the reports, we identified that things like reef habitats are currently underrepresented in Irish waters in terms of MPA coverage. So we wanted to understand how to basically expand, for the purpose of this exercise, how to expand the MPA network looking specifically at reef habitats. Thankfully, National Parks and Wildlife Services had recently completed a reef habitat survey. So we had very good comprehensive data about what kind of reefs there are in Ireland and where they're found. And this is then complemented with data, pressure data available through the Irish government and through eModNet, the sort of open access portal. This is essentially how, for those unfamiliar, how the sensitivity analysis works. It's basically a pressure matrix where you have on one side what the pressures are, so different kinds of fishing, physical change to habitat, physical change to sediment, change to hydrological conditions. If you can think of a pressure, it's modeled and mapped in this matrix. You then go through the available scientific and expert literature to identify how sensitive each feature is at each stage to each of these pressures. So how sensitive are certain types of biogenic reef to fishing or ORE or shipping and so on. And we're able to basically reuse a lot of the data that would have been gathered over the last few years done by the expert advisory groups to basically save us time with data collection. So there were three main pressures to worry about when it comes to protecting reefs. You're worried about offshore renewable energy. I don't want anyone to get too worried about the map of the wind farms. This was just the areas of potential wind farm locations. I don't know if this is what will be going forward or not. This is just the data I was given access to. You then have vessel data. This is specifically fishing and cruise ships, that kind of thing. And then bottom contact gear such as benthic trawling. You then overlay that with the existing SACs and SPAs, those are the already designated MPAs in Ireland, and then map those on top with where the habitats are. And so through using this tool and interpreting these outputs, you can see that actually, if you wanted to protect, for the sake of argument, reef habitats in Ireland, there wouldn't actually be a lot of overlap with the pressures. So in theory, it's actually a very easy win for conservation. You don't really upset any of the major parties involved, and you get to say that you're protecting the reef habitats. Going through and testing the Plan Waste for Blue tool, we were then able to suggest recommendations for how to improve and develop the tool further so people can use it better in the future. So one of the things people put back to us was they wanted the tool to have inbuilt mechanisms for a stronger scientific basis for management decisions. So rather than say me having to go and do the sensitivity analysis myself, which could take quite a lot of time, there'd be inbuilt things like effect sizes from previous systematic reviews into the tool. So you could just type in reef habitat and it automatically spits out how sensitive reefs are to different pressures. Obviously, the outputs I showed are not the most user-friendly. So this is something we're trying to work on. How can we improve the presentation of the outputs so it's better to translate these findings towards wider audiences? And basically work out improvements for just general usability and interpretability, just so there's faster uptake in practice. So that was the ecological side of the tools we tested. And then the second side was more the social governance tools. So the human dimensions in marine protected areas. This was work not led by me, but by my colleague Thomas, who's also a research fellow at UCD. And he focused his work on Dundalk Bay. Now, Dundalk Bay is recognised as both an SPA and an SAC as part of the wider Natura 2000 network. And why Thomas was interested in this is because it basically provides an opportunity to intervene early in MPA designation and management cycles and work out with stakeholders how to identify key priorities, such as management measures. The issue with Dundalk Bay throughout its life is that stakeholders have felt that their involvement in the MPA process has been diminished over time. So, and respondents to Thomas's work basically indicated that there was no tool or method that could be applied to their MPA to help ensure stakeholder recognition in MPA processes. So Thomas basically was trying to work out how we can use the existing tools within social governance research to help support efforts in areas like Dundalk Bay. And essentially the idea, well, to quote him, was to get people around and have a chat, but he decided to dress it up a little bit by calling them workshops with facilitated discussions. And this was basically a way to how can you create a formalized process for having a chat. So he conducted a two-stage stakeholder engagement process in Dundalk Bay using his facilitated discussion group method, which was guided by the concept of path dependency. So who are you, where are you coming from, and where do you want to get to? In this case, who are you as a stakeholder, and where do you want to get to with management measures? So the work happened over the last few years between September 2024 and February 2025. It involved 9 main stakeholder groups from local and national government, the offshore renewable energy sector, fisheries, and community groups. The first part of the work focused on understanding the individual groups' relationships to Dundalk Bay and how that's changed over time. And then phase 2 is about bringing those stakeholders together to discuss ideas and how to generate priorities related for management of the bay. So initially, there was quite a bit of confusion over the governance and monitoring of the bay, including within the government bodies themselves. No one was really sure who was responsible for what and in what capacity. And there's currently a lack of consultation for both formal and informal stakeholders. The stakeholders themselves identified multiple opportunities for collaboration in the context of the MPA government, but found this difficult in practice because essentially there's not really anyone in charge. And to help facilitate a tool like this moving forward, you basically need either a central stakeholder engagement forum or a dedicated manager just to help facilitate and guide the discussions. This is work that he is still in the process of developing. This is just roughly where he's up to. And thank you very much.